As we start to talk more specifically about cells and breaking them down into different categories, we do have two major categories. They are the prokaryotic or prokaryote cells, and then we have eukaryotic or eukaryote cells. And so at first glance, one of the big differences between them, the prokaryotic cells are going to be a lot smaller. And this also means they're going to be simpler. So if we look at them a little closer, they're going to have one chromosome, and that's it. And that chromosome is going to be circular. And it's just kind of wadded up in the middle of the cell. So that right there would be the DNA, or the circular chromosome, and it is located in what is called a nucleoid region. And this will be a big difference between the prokaryotic and the eukaryotic cells. Now, in addition to that, we will have no membrane-bound what we call organelles. And so this means there's no membrane-bound compartments inside the cell. Instead, the only membrane that it has is going to be this plasma membrane, which is located around the outside of the cell, and certainly very important to the prokaryotic cell. It's just that that happens to be the only one that we have. If we talk about examples of prokaryotic organisms, this is bacteria cells. So that's going to be your most common one. And then we do have one other group that falls into this category, and that's what we call Archaea. But those tend to be not quite as familiar to students. The eukaryotic cells, on the other hand, those are going to be the organisms that you're much more familiar with. So this is going to include animals, plants, fungi would be another one. And then we do have this odd category, which is called the protists. So the eukaryotic cells, they're just, first of all, they're going to be much bigger. And at the same time, they will be more complex. They're going to have linear chromosomes. And those linear chromosomes, there can be quite a lot of them. If we're talking about humans, for example, there's going to be 46 of them. And those linear chromosomes would be located in this compartment, and that compartment is going to be what we call a nucleus. So the nucleus is going to be a very large compartment really inside the cell. But the key here is that this one is membrane bound. And so that means that it is surrounded by a membrane on the outside. So we could draw it right here, but that membrane is going to really isolate everything that's inside the nucleus, so those linear chromosomes, from everything else that we happen to have inside the cell. You do, in addition to the nucleus, have lots of membrane-bound organelles. And we call them organelles, and you can think of them similar to the organs of our body. These are going to be little compartments that are surrounded by a membrane inside of the cell, and each one's going to have its own job. So as is shown on here, we see a number of different colored things inside the cell. So there's lots of different ones. These are all going to represent organelles, and each one is going to perform a different job for the cell. So just for example purposes, the lysosome is an organelle. Mitochondria would be an organelle. Other ones would be like a chloroplast. We have vacuoles, endoplasmic reticulum. So there is this really long list of eukaryotic organelles. So if you wanted to break down the difference between prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells to one major thing, it all has to do with membranes. So both of them do have the plasma membrane around the outside. But the big difference is that the eukaryotic, they have internal membranes. And those internal membranes will divide the inside of the cell into many different compartments, which we then call organelles. Each one of those compartments is then going to be able to specialize in some type of activity. this is something that we don't have with the prokaryotic cells. So the prokaryotic cells, they really have just that plasma membrane around the outside.